everyone. My name is Cheryl Straffon. I've been into goddess and goddess research for about 20, 30, 40 years now. And very pleased to be able to talk to you as part of the Goddess Conference. And the presentation is going to be about the Crone Goddess, Lady of the Otherworld. So I'll be talking mainly about the Cailleach. Now, Cailleach is Irish word, Irish Gaelic. I'm not a native Gaelic speaker, so you'll have to excuse my pronunciations. So anybody that speaks Gaelic will probably be groaning, but I'll do my best with it. Cailleach probably originally meant the veiled one or the hooded one, but it has come to mean the old one, the crone, the hag. It was well known throughout prehistory and even into medieval times. And I'm going to start with an extract from a poem that was written in the medieval time called The Lament of the Hag of Beara. And I just want to read a couple, 4 verses from that medieval poem. I am the hag of Beara, an ever new smock I used to wear. Today, such is my mean estate, I wear not even a cast-off smock. The maidens rejoice when May Day comes to them. For me, sorrow is meeter. I am wretched. I am an old hag. Amen. Woe is me. Every acorn has to drop after feasting by shining candles to be in the gloom of a prayer. I had my day with kings, drinking mead and wine. Today, I drink whey water among shriveled old hags. Now that poem was quite well known in medieval times, and by that time, the Cailleach had become a crone, a hag, an old woman. Someone perhaps to be pitied, someone who only could remember her youth as something that had long gone. For us of a certain age, I'm now 75, and I remember being croned at a goddess conference many, many years ago. It may seem that age is all that distinguishes the Cailleach, but it wasn't always so. And in fact, the further we go back in time, the more we see what a complex being the Cailleach was. And age was not the main thing that distinguished her. She was often seen in the beginning as a primal goddess, a goddess of creation, strangely enough, and a goddess who contained much ancient wisdom within herself. So if we go to the first slide, we see that it is a rock, an outcrop rock. And some of you may know it. It lies in the west of Ireland, and it lies on the Beara Peninsula in County Cork. Now, the birth of the crone, the hag, is put down in several places. Different legends say that she came from different parts of the world, but in particular, she is seen to come from the west of Ireland. One legend says she was born at Dingle in County Kerry. But the main legend of her is that she comes from the Beara Peninsula in County Cork in the west of Ireland. And she is known really throughout these islands as the Hag of Beara. And that Beara is actually a place name. The Beara Peninsula it lies, as I said, in the southwest part of Ireland, and it is there from which she comes. And this is actually the crone herself. This rock was seen to be a petrified form of the Cailleach. Next slide, please. And that's another shot of it. And interestingly, when you visit this rock, which lies in a field beside the loch, the thing that struck me most when I first visited it was the beautiful breast-shaped hill on the other side of the loch. It's as if the Cailleach rock is aligned perfectly with that breast-shaped hill. Now, we know from other places, such as the Paps of Anu in Ireland and Paps of Jura in Scotland, that breast-shaped hills were thought of as representing the breasts of the Mother Goddess. So immediately, the first time we come across her, the first time we see her, she is placed in relationship to a nurturing goddess, a mother nurturing goddess. That's the first thread of her complexity, really. But she herself is thought to exist in this stone, in this rock, and it is a place now of some pilgrimage for groups, goddess groups, and other people who come to see her there and to touch her there. Next one, please. And here's a goddess touring group who was there visiting her. And you can see that people have left little stones and pebbles and quartz stones and offerings in the cracks of the rock as a homage to her. So even after all this time, she's still visited, she's still loved, she's still revered as being the original hag or crone goddess. Next slide, please. And this is a friend of mine, Jill Smith, at the Hag Rock, and this shows very clearly the beautiful offerings that have been left for her. Quartzes, pebbles, all manner of things have been placed there to her. And this is really building just on an ancient tradition, because it was the Cailleach rock that the fishermen used to visit and place offerings before they went out to fish at sea in order to ask her for a safe passage out to sea. So immediately we see another significant strand of her, that she was a being whom people went to ask for help and ask for safety in life. And she gave them that when they went out fishing on the loch. It's interesting that there must be a real continuity of use of this rock, and that people have, for many generations, thought of it as being a sacred place, a place where you came to ask help from the goddess. The legend of the Cailleach Beara stone is that she sits there waiting for her consort, Manannan MacLear, who is the Irish god of the sea, to return to her. There is no other rocks or stones like it anywhere nearby. It really stands out as an erratic. And there's a little board giving the Christian version of her legend. But clearly it's a place that people still use, people still go to. And it's a place where it makes you feel the Cailleach is not an abstract concept, but is a real living goddess, still in the stone and still seen in the rock. Because of her location, I've often thought that this was the place where people who came into Ireland, because there were successive waves of invasions of Ireland back in the Neolithic, this was a place that people came to first and recognised that rock as representing their goddess. This would make the Cailleach one of the most ancient of all the goddesses, the one who was known about in an original Neolithic or even early Bronze Age mythology. And she was known about, I think, as being a primal goddess of creation. She was a goddess who created the forms of the land that you see now around you. And that legend is carried to other sites throughout Ireland and into Wales and into Scotland and also into England. We'll look at some of those in the course of this presentation. From the peninsula, the Beara Peninsula, the Cailleach Beara was taken to other places. Next. If you, there are 3 peninsulas in the west of Ireland, and the Cailleach Beara is known about. That's the most southerly one, the Beara Peninsula. But actually, the 2 other peninsulas to the north also had cailleachs associated with them, not generally known about. The one directly north of Beara is the Beara Peninsula. That's where the Ring of Kerry goes. I think a lot of people will know about. But that also has a cailleach associated with it. That's the Cailleach Bolle, was known about in the Beara Peninsula. And a third peninsula, again, some people will certainly know about, is the Dingle Peninsula. And that too has a cailleach associated with it. It has the Cailleach Daingin associated with that peninsula. And the Cailleach Daingin is the goddess of that Dingle Peninsula and is said to live on a mountain there about 6 kilometers northeast of Dingle. And it's here that she is personified as 3 goddesses in one. So we have a triple goddess, Beara, Beara, and Dingle Peninsula. And in the Dingle Peninsula, we have another triple goddess, 3 goddesses in one. One of those goddesses lives in a cairn called the Hag's Cabin. Another is called the Cailleach Jubiach and lives in a cave called the Crone Cailleach. And the third is called the Cailleach Laignic, who is the equivalent of the Morrigan. So it's really interesting that having arrived in the Beara Peninsula, the goddess starts to spread and change and multiply, and other places in the landscape become also associated with her, which again makes me think that her origins go back into the mist of time, and that the original inhabitants of this part of Ireland certainly recognised her and honoured her and saw her actually in the land itself. Next, please. We now travel further into Ireland, still in County Cork, but this is near Glenworth, and it's a cairn called the Labbacalee cairn. And the interesting thing of Ireland is, as I'm sure you know, scattered with cairns everywhere. But the interesting thing about this one is it also has a cailleach association. Next, please. That's a side view of the cairn, and the cairn is known as the Hag's Bed, and it was thought to be the place where the cailleach was buried. This is the cailleach's grave. So once again, we see that not only natural places in the landscape, but also places that were built by the Neolithic and Bronze Age ancestors also have the cailleach associated with them, and were also thought to be places that the cailleach dwelt, or in this case died and was buried in the land. Next, please. If you ever get a chance to visit it, this is an inside view of it. Although parts of it are ruined, it still has a very powerful presence, especially when you think that to the people it was thought to be the place that the spirit of the Cailleach dwelt. There are other places, of course, associated with her as we travel across. Next, please. One of the most famous of those is this. This is Loch Crew, which is a double hilltop in County Meath. It's covered with cairns, and it's I think 20 or so cairns and chambered tombs, and these cairns, and particularly this one, Cairn T, in legend, is supposed to have been dropped by the Cailleach as she flew across the land. So here we see her incarnation as a land creating goddess. She created the mounds and the hills and the ancient cairns that were built by the prehistoric peoples. So Cairn T has this distinctive shaped stone on the side of it, and that was thought to be the actual chair of the hag. It's called the hag's chair. It was thought that she sat on that chair, on that rock, smoking her pipe and looking over all the lands of this part of the eastern side of Ireland. The cairn the chair joins, as I mentioned, was Cairn T, and this cairn, until quite recently, was open to the public. It's been postulated that all the cairns on this hilltop of Loch Crew, Carnbane East, were orientated to specific sunrises and sunsets at different times of the solar year. Next one. And this particular one at Cairn T has this beautiful stone at the rear of it that was covered with these symbols when it was built. These symbols have been chalked in so you can see them more clearly. And the amazing thing about Cairn T is, and I've been lucky enough to be there, is that it's aligned to the spring and autumn equinox sunrises. I remember when we visited it at the autumn equinox, the morning was very, very misty everywhere. And we thought, well, we're not going to see a sunrise, but we still went there just in case. And we got there and climbed the hill, covered in mist. You couldn't see in front of your face. And when we got to the top of the hill, we came out of the mist. And amazingly, and looked down, and there was this great swirl of mist below us. But at the entrance of the cairn, we saw the sun rise, entered the chamber, and it picks out the top left symbol when it first rises, which is clearly a sun symbol, and the light carries down in a beam of light diagonally across the symbols, illuminating each one in turn. And it's been suggested that the symbols represent both the sun and also possibly the lunar passage, the metonic cycle. In any case, this was clearly a significant place for the prehistoric peoples to view the equinox sunrise. And it's a very magical moment. The light finally reaches the bottom right, which may be a symbol of a boat, because it was in ancient mythology that the sun was thought to travel in a boat across the sky every day, and disappear into the underworld at the end of the day, and then in the next day it would reappear in a boat and travel across the sky. And that one symbol is separate slightly from the rest, and the light at the equinox sunrises illuminates finally that symbol, and then switches off like an old-fashioned television set. But a most amazing magical experience. And I always think that the magic that we can still find in ancient sites when we visit them is enhanced when we know that there are legends associated with them. And in this case, the legend of the Cailleach dropping her stones, of which this was one. As she flew across the land, she dropped her stones out of her apron. And many legends are of this giantess's apron, whereby she dropped the stones across the land. So as we're moving across the land, we're seeing different aspects of the Cailleach, not ones you perhaps might expect. She was the ancestress goddess. She was the creatrix goddess, who formed both the land itself and the sites that were built on the land. Okay, from I got one more Loch Crew, please, which is a lovely painting by Jill Smith, which clearly shows next the KNT at Loch Crew, the Cailleach sweeping across the sky and pointing to the symbols that were found at the end of the entrance of the cairn. Okay, thank you. Next one. We move to other sites in Ireland. I can't cover them all, but just one or two. This is the Ballykeil dolmen at the foot of Slieve Gullion. Now, Slieve Gullion in County Armagh has a passage tomb on the top of the hill. You can see the hill through the dolmen, called the Cailleach Beara's house. It's a large Bronze Age passage tomb on the top of Slieve Gullion. And the nearby lake is known as the Cailleach Beara's Loch and is reputed to be bottomless. And she herself is said to live in a deep chamber at the bottom of the mountain. At the base of the hill is a rocky hillock, on top of which is the Cailleach Beara's chair, where local people used to sit as part of a ceremonial visit, something akin to sitting on the Cailleach Beara's chair at Loch Crew. So it used to be that local people would very much visit these sites, even as late as our time, in order still to honour the Cailleach, because these places were thought to be very sacred places in the landscape, and it was clearly a powerful experience to connect with them and to visit them. So there are many places throughout Ireland that have this association and have this legend, but we've got limited time, so we need to move on and move from Ireland into Wales. Next, please. Because the knowledge of the Cailleach Beara was brought across from Ireland into Wales and into Scotland. And this site is called, again, excuse my Welsh pronunciations. I know a bit of Cornish, but I'm not a native Welsh speaker either. But this is the Cloriadi Gares in Anglesey. It's an entrance grave, a very large mound. And the significance of it for this association with the Cailleach is the meaning of the name of the Cloriadi Gares is the giantess's apron. Now, it's clearly a memory, it's clearly a reference to the legend of the Cailleach flying across the land and dropping the stones and the rocks and the mounds out of her apron. And interestingly, next please, this mound has a number of inscribed stones inside it as well. This is one of them. And again, with the same kind of symbols, lozenges, meanders, curves, markings that we found at KNT at Loch Crew. So there's something about rock art, the decoration of stones at some of these places, in a language perhaps that is really lost to us, that we don't really understand, but must have been known by the Neolithic people who made the rock art, describing something about the passage of the sun through the year, and also its association with this ancestrix goddess, the Cailleach, who created these sites, dropped the stones that made the sites. Next, please. While we're in Wales, we'll pop down to Pembrokeshire in the southwest of Wales. This site will be known to many people. This is Pentre, and its importance to us is that it was known as the womb of Cerridwen. Now, Cerridwen has characteristics so similar to Cailleach that she must be the Welsh version of the Cailleach. She's an old woman, but she has magic powers, and there are many myths and stories about her in ancient Irish texts. For instance, next one, please. She was thought to dwell at Lake Beara in mid Wales, in Gwynedd, and she was thought to dwell at the bottom of Lake Beara. She had a son called Guion Bach, who was also immersed in this lake at Beara, and transferred into Taliesin, who was a prophet, and could see both everything since the beginning of time and into the future. And all this is recorded in stories in the Mabinogi, the Welsh text. But it's really interesting that this mythic material, which is unique to Wales, of Cerridwen, does seem to have so many links with the folklore and the legends of the Cailleach in Ireland. From Wales, we move to Scotland next. And again, there are many places, many legends in Scotland of the Cailleach, so we can only think that she was brought there originally from Ireland. She's also known as the Cailleach Beara in Scotland, so that makes me think that she obviously came originally from the Beara Peninsula in Ireland. In Scotland, there's a place called Tober Cailleach in Banffshire, Keith, and it's a well and was known as the Old Woman's Well. It's reputed to have been used up until the 1960s as a healing well. So again, this is another different aspect of the Cailleach, that she's a healing goddess. The well was said to have been home to a pagan community who lived thereabouts and regularly went to the well in order for healing purposes. They obviously viewed the spirit of the Earth Mother in her old woman phase as being in the well, and they bathed in the well. And the legend was that if you bathed in the well, you would keep your youth and would return from the well as a young maiden. So it's very interesting that many of these themes get placed into sacred places in the land. And if you're ever in Scotland on March the 25th, then you can celebrate Latrana Cailleach Day. They do actually have a day up there, the Day of the Old Woman, or the Cailleach, which is really interesting, that it still continues even up until this present day. Okay, we've gone to a remote place in Scotland now. This is Glen Cailleach, which leads off a glen, which leads off Glen Lyon in Aberfeldy in Perthshire. It's very remote. It's quite difficult to get to. I know perhaps some of you listening to this actually have been there. I've never managed it, although my friend Jill Smith has, and it's thanks to her that we have these photos that I'm able to show you. As you travel up this glen, you get to this point, and you'll see this small little hut that's built beside the stream that runs down the glen, and it's thatched, it's turfed on top of it as well. So people have gone to some considerable care to build this. And the thing that's really significant about it is what you see in the foreground of the picture, the stones in the front. Next, please. Now, these stones are deliberately shaped. This is an aerial view looking down, and the stone that has a human form on the left is the kayak. The stream is called Cailleach, the Hag Stream, and in the shadow of Beara Cailleach, the Hag's Mountain, is this pile of stones called Cailleach, the Hag's House. The constructed shelter is there permanently, and the figures, the anthropomorphic figures, are all made out of natural stones taken from the burn. These figures represent the kayak herself, as I said on the left, and she's facing the bodak, who's her husband, the old man. So interesting, the kayak is much much bigger than the bodak, the old man. And some of their daughters are the stones which are lying about, currently 5 in number. Next, please. That's Jill kneeling in front of the hag's house, and the figurines that you can see very clearly in front of it. Closer up at the figurines, next. You can see that they've definitely been shaped and made to represent the kayak and other figures as well. The interesting thing about these stones, and this wasn't very well known about until a few decades ago, is that the stones are placed there by local people. Next, please. And it's always a tradition that the local people go up around about Beltane every year, and we know that the cattle were taken up into the high places around about Beltane, so it may have happened about the same time originally. And the stones, the kayak and the bodak and the daughters are kept inside the hut over winter. And then when they go up around Beltane time, they take them out and place them in front of the hut. And this is still done. I'm assured that even up until the present day, local people do still go up and do this. Next one. And clearly, if you talk to them about it, why they do it, they say they do it for a good harvest, so their cattle are protected and the land is blessed. So again, we have another slightly different aspect of the goddess. She's the one who blesses the land, who provides a favourable place for the fertility of the land and the rearing of the animals and perhaps the growing of the crops. And she's still there. She's still in the land. Takes us full circle, really, from the beginning, where we found her as a rock, a natural rock down at the Beara Peninsula, to this place off Glen Lyon, where we see her in the stones and the rocks, guarding the glen and having their own little house to live into. Around about at the end of summer, they will go up and put the figurines back into the house, and there they will remain until the following spring, when they're brought back again. So the kayak is all things. She's a hag, she's a crone, she's an old lady, but she's a fertility goddess as well, who blesses the land. She's a healing goddess that people go to in the holy waters of her well. She's a goddess who lives in the other world, the underworld, at the bottom of a loch. Her womb can be seen in the land in the form of a dolmen, and that you look through towards the holy mountain, Carningli, as we saw in Wales. She has many different kinds of aspects. And I'd like to finish with just a couple more from Scotland. Next, please. This is Ben Nevis in Scotland, Scotland's highest mountain. Legend has it, it was from here she was said to ride out with her 8 sister hags, each of them equipped with a hammer or wand, with which they struck the earth, causing it to freeze. On the side of the mountain is something called Outna Cailleach, which means the stream of the Cailleach. And clearly this was seen as a holy mountain, a sacred mountain. And I wouldn't be surprised if it weren't known to be a place created by the Cailleach herself, because as we've seen, she travels across the land, creating sacred places as she goes. Another story of Ben Nevis states that the Cailleach is the manifestation of winter in traditional law, but keeps the beautiful young and fertile bride, or Bridget or Breed, symbol of summer, imprisoned on the mountain, till she can keep her no longer, and the world bursts into spring anew. So the Cailleach is very, although she's associated with winter, her giving over to bride at around the spring equinox, or as we saw at Loch Crew, or even Beltane, is the handing over from winter to spring, in the eternal turn of the wheel of the year and the seasons. She's known in many traditional tales as the creator of the landscape, a clear sign of the original mythology. And at Ben Nevis, she's also the weather worker supreme. She's the oldest being, but she's also the firstborn. She has so many of these different kinds of attributes. And finally, please, we're going to leave her at this place, which is an appropriate place to leave her, I think. This is Corrie Brecon, and it's off the Isle of Beara, which is one of the islands off the west coast of Scotland. And it's a very famous whirlpool. This shot shows it very clearly. The name of the whirlpool, and it's one of only 7, I think it is, geophysical events of its type in the whole of our planet, originates from Corrie Brecon, which means the cauldron of the Brecon or the Plaid. Now, the legend of this place is where at the beginning of winter, the Cailleach comes to wash her plaid. It takes place in October, November, and the sound of the Corrie Brecon at this time can be heard for over 20 miles away. It's a very dramatic whirlpool. You wouldn't want to be on the sea anywhere near it. But the whirlpool eddies in that form, and the gulf is named after it as well, as the Gulf of Corrie Brecon. And it's still known in Gaelic lore as the breath of the goddess under the waters. And it just seems wonderful to me that there are still places we can go to in the land to catch the breath of the goddess and see the places of the Cailleach. I hope you can get to see some of them. And I hope they mean as much to you as they have to me over the years. Thank you.